So let's say you're an aspiring filmmaker, photographer, and you're making that first step in buying your first proper camera. Now that decision can be a little intimidating because there's so many options out there and you have to identify your budget. And despite all these options and lens setups and cameras, Sony, Nikon, Canon, I think there's one particular setup that stands out and really takes the cake in terms of bang for your buck. And it happens to be the camera setup I'm using right now. It's the Panasonic Lumix G7 accompanied with the Panasonic 25mm f1.7 or nifty 50 equivalent lens. Unlike smartphones, cameras tend to age much more gracefully, which is why this 4-year-old camera setup can still produce amazing quality images, especially if you light things correctly. So let's talk about why I love this camera. First of all, it's pretty cheap in 2018. You can get it with a kit lens, the 14-42 from Panasonic, for around $500, which is insane considering what you're getting. Secondly, it has very intuitive controls. You have a very nicely placed record button, and those dials that help you adjust ISO and aperture are a lifesaver. You can dial in your manual settings very efficiently. Thirdly, this camera has a flip-out screen, which is great for things like street photography, if you want to be more subtle, and filming yourself, doing A-roll like I am right now. And most importantly, it helps you capture particular weird angles without having to look through a viewfinder or a sedentary display. And one thing I forgot to mention about the display is that it's touchscreen. And once you use a touchscreen display where you can tap the focus, you're never going to want to return to a non-touch panel on a camera. It just is like a must-have feature in 2018, I think. Fourthly, it has an amazing OLED viewfinder and it adjusts to your manual settings. So what you see is what you get. There's no guesswork. You're not staring through a mirror. You are staring into the sensor pretty much. I mean, it's like the same screen, just smaller. You can look through it. It's really high resolution. It's very high refresh rate. And overall, just an amazing feature in this camera. Fifthly, it has a very ergonomic grip. I have not had any issues holding this camera for long periods of time. It's comfortable, it's compact, and just fits really nicely in your hand. Number 6, the interface is very intuitive, especially with that touchscreen. I mean, it's pretty transparent. There's no guesswork that you have to do. It's nothing like the Canon or Sony menus. I mean, it's all right there in front of you. You don't have to spend a lot of time if you want to tweak or adjust a particular setting. Number 7, you can shoot in a plethora of frame rates, formats, and resolutions. I mean, you don't get like 240 FPS slow-mo or 4K 60, but you got a lot to work with. I mean, 4K 30, 4K 24, 1080p 60, 1080p 30, 1080p 24, and AVHD, I think that's what it's called, and MP4. So despite the fact that this camera lacks 4K 60 and proper slow motion, you still have a lot of versatility, like I said, with the format, resolution, and frame rate. Number 8, I think this camera has amazing battery life. I've gone through days of shooting B-roll and photos and have not even brought it down to like 2 bars or 1 bar. I mean, you can go shooting for hours with this camera with a single battery. It's pretty great. And lastly, you have a Wi-Fi remote control, so you can take photos remotely without touching the camera. Say you want to do a time lapse or monitor your camera without touching it. And I always use this when I'm shooting A-roll. So like right now, you can see I'm using the app to control, ISO and shutter speed and, recording and focusing in manual. So it's a lifesaver if you were a standalone shooter. Of course, there are some downsides to this camera. Number 1, you can't really monitor with a physical link. So that's kind of sucky. But I mean, if you want that monitoring, I mean, you probably would be buying a more expensive camera anyway. Secondly, there is a 30-minute record limit, which can kind of suck if you're recording like a live event. You're going to have to be mindful of, where you are and how you're going to be recording that. Like I shot a play a couple months ago for my old school. So in some ways it can be a big deal, but if your career or your work doesn't depend on recording, like long spurts of video, it should not really be an issue. Thirdly, there is really no proper slow motion, as I said, no 120 FPS, no 180 FPS, no 240 FPS, I guess if that's super important to you, either save up for a better camera, or maybe use this camera or a different cheaper camera and make some money in order to buy that camera that can shoot in slow motion. And number 4, the SD card slot is not in the most convenient place. You kind of have to take your camera off your rig or your tripod in order to access the data. It's a little frustrating, but if you have quick release plates like I do, which you should buy if you're serious about video, I mean, it makes a world of a difference. Once again, it shouldn't be that big of a problem. But of course, there are a few more upsides to this camera that kind of outweigh the cons, I think. Firstly, the Micro Four Thirds lens lineup is huge and pretty affordable in a lot of cases. I mean, this lens I'm using right now, the 25mm f1.7 prime lens, beautiful lens, by the way. I mean, you can see the image right now. I love it. I've gotten insane shots with it. I'm so satisfied with it. It has really changed the way I shoot. It costs $147. I also own the 45 to 150 from Panasonic, you know, great portrait lens in the right lighting, and that costs around $150. So if you want to get like a proper lens setup, of course, nothing like crazily expensive, you can get, you know, a couple lenses, including the kit lens that comes with the G7 for like $300, which is pretty insane considering the versatility you get with those lenses that you'd be using. You know, you have the 25 for your nice prime shots where you want nice bokeh and, you know, maybe you want to shoot in low light. Then you have the telephoto, which works great, you know, for portraits and long range photography. And then you got the kit lens, which goes super wide and you can shoot at 14 millimeter, and the possibilities with that 3 lens setup just go on and on and on. That's what I'm working with right now, and it's been really great. Lastly, and once again, really, this camera is cheap. It's like $500 with a kit lens. It has so much potential, so much versatility. You can use it for YouTube, cinematography, you know, senior pictures. You can make money with this incredible tool, and I certainly have, and I've enjoyed using it for the past 3 years, and I pretty much live and swear by it until I, you know, get a bigger, badder, and better camera. But for right now, it just works for me. Like, I got this camera a couple years ago anticipating that I would want to upgrade in like a year or two. But as of right now, you know, now that I've learned to work with light properly, and now that I've, you know, really kind of unlocked its full potential, I'm really happy with this camera, and I don't really see a huge reason to upgrade until I, you know, really get serious in terms of YouTube and freelance work and whatever, until I start making money. Long story short, you can pull off incredible things with this camera in 2018, especially if you know what you're doing. So yeah, that about wraps things up. I hope this video helped you out. If you are an aspiring filmmaker and photographer like I am, I know it can be a difficult decision to pick out your first camera, but I swear by it. I love this camera, I live by it, and I love it. And I really highly recommend it to you, you know, if you are looking for a camera that can shoot 4K, incredible images, and is pretty affordable for what it can do. I'd really appreciate it if you leave a like in the video, comment if you have any questions or suggestions about my camera setup, and subscribe for more content like this. And as always, I'm Noah, and I will catch you all in the next one.